Tell us a little bit about what you saw and being able to relay that message to Cora when you watched Kimbrel pitch and kind of help out so he wasn't tipping his pitches.
So tipping pitches, we hear about it all the time.
People at home understand what tipping pitches is all about.
It's amazing.
And that's remarkable.
Alex, do you ever worry that like when we're getting ready to do a podcast episode about extremely in the weeds, labor, finance, business, legal, whatever it might be, topics, that people will listen and think that we don't know ball? Like that we don't know about baseball, or we don't love the sport itself, or that we don't, we can't judge who's a good player and who's not, or really know ball. And so instead we hide behind our little academia approach to the sport of baseball, our sociocultural and analytical lens through which we look at this game. Do you ever worry about that?
I think that anyone who
has attended a baseball game with us.
Well, yeah. I think anyone who would be in a position to feel like that about us is oftentimes seeing too much red about our take on the economic structure of baseball that doesn't even cross their mind.
They're not wondering whether or not we could assess if a young prospect has it.
No, they don't. They don't care. They don't care. That's the water they're carrying for owners is breaking on their back too much.
Okay. Well, to quell or curb any accusations that people might lob towards us that we don't actually know ball, I wanted to start by talking about something that's not CBA related at all. I wanted to share a take that occurred to me this past week.
Oh, okay, great.
A little take for you. A little something I'm a little working out in the edit, all right? you and the listeners, you're going to help me figure this one out, okay?
I love when you workshop a take in real time.
I think that having a top 1% plate discipline actually might make you worse at challenging, and here's why.
Mm-hmm.
I think the human eye literally can't tell when it gets that close, like underneath an inch. So if you have a solid eye at the plate, you're able to tell when it's an inch or more, or like 0.7 inches or more off of the plate, and when you got hosed on the call as the batter, for example. When you have a great eye and you think it's within an inch, it's like on the borderline, such as Juan Soto, for example, you trust yourself so much.
Yeah.
But actually, your eyes deceive you because they are
lures you into a false sense of confidence. Yeah,
correct. And so you challenge plays that are closer when really challenges should be reserved for pitches that are 0.7 inches about or more away from the plate. So therefore, you have to have a good eye to be good at challenges. If you have a great eye, that might counterintuitively make you bad at challenges.
Interesting. Wow. So the new Moneyball is he doesn't get on base.
The new Moneyball is being 80% good at something. Here's why. Okay, Juan Soto, he's been pretty good on challenges, but he has gotten a few wrong. And I think a lot of people would be like, well, Juan Soto knows the strike zone better than anybody. If Juan Soto said it wasn't a strike, then the umpire should just agree with that. That's been a sort of sentiment that has been shared in past years before we actually had the ABS system. But he's gotten a few close calls wrong, particularly on breaking balls that are going away from him, because he's like, there's no way that could have clipped the strike zone. I know where that landed. I know where it was going. He couldn't have hit it, so he thinks he should challenge it.
Right.
Because it couldn't have been a strike. But it technically was a strike by this very, very specific definition of the strike zone that we've talked about. He challenged a pitch that was within 0.1 inches, when it comes up and it's like less than 0.1 inches. That's not a good use of a challenge because it's so close. There's no way he could have possibly known. The closer the call, the worse of a challenge it is, and the less it should actually happen. Conversely, I think when people think it's close, they're like, that's an amazing challenge. How did he do that? How did he know? He didn't know. He guessed, and he happened to be right this time.
This is a beautiful take. I'm in love with this take.
Thank you. If I was a GM, I would be tracking how many times someone challenged when it's like an inch or more, and I'd be giving them a reward for that. But I would be punishing them, even if they get it right, if they challenged if it's 0.3 inches or less. Because that's too close. That's too close. In the aggregate, you don't want to be challenging those pitches. You want to be challenging the ones that are more egregious, knowing frankly, you can get it right.
This is why I think that the challenges should not be linked to the team, but linked into the individual, because we need a little more personal responsibility involved here, right? You're welcome to challenge that, but you personally may not get any more challenges the rest of the game. So how confident are you? You know?
How about this? Challenges per season. Everyone gets 50 challenges per year. Maybe that's too high. I'd have to crunch the numbers a little bit, but and if you lose them, if you get it right, you keep the challenge, and if you get it wrong, you lose the challenge. So you could challenge every pitch of the first game of the season.
Yeah.
If you get them right, you keep them. If you get them wrong, you're screwed, and you can't challenge for the rest of the season. I like this. This is good.
Yeah.
I don't know how it exactly works with calling a player up midway through the season. Do you prorate their challenges? Does it reset their challenge quantity when they go back down to the minors? Probably not, right?
If there's one thing about us, we're going to take a rule that MLB has implemented and try and make it astronomically more complicated so that it fits our specific worldview.
I'm just saying, I think MLB could benefit from having guys like us in the room. Detail-oriented
I've always
thinkers.
said this. They won't let us in, unfortunately.
I'm knocking on the door, Eric Andre style.
It's not stopping me from sending the emails to Rob, though.
How are those emails going? Has he
I
responded to any of them?
recap every episode after we record it. I'm just like, hey, Rob, just to give you the inside track, here's what we discussed on this one.
I hope you don't have Claude write those summaries, though, because otherwise the Pope will excommunicate you, even though you did go to Catholic school.
That's true.
Okay, thanks for supporting my take. We have a great podcast ahead where we will discuss collective bargaining. We got some proposals. We love proposals here on the Tipping Pitches podcast. We got some housekeeping to do, and we're going to talk to our friend Bradford William Davis later in the podcast about some of the reporting that he's been doing, great reporting that he's been doing on his newsletter called iBlack about MLB's investigation into various domestic violence allegations. Before we do all of that, I am Bobby Wagner.
I'm Alex Baisley.
And you are listening to Tipping Pitches, a podcast that knows ball. Thank you to this week's new patrons, Matea, Nate, and Walker. Quickly on the Patreon front, Alex, I wanted to just give people a little preview of what's coming later this summer. We got Sipping Pitches 2.0, where if you are unfamiliar, last year we had Sipping Pitches 1.0, aka just Sipping Pitches. We didn't call it 1.0 at the time. This is where we taste test a bunch of alcohols that are owned or prominently sponsored by MLB players or coaches or owners. I think many people listening to this are aware of this. We will be conducting a 2.0 episode. We will be conducting a second edition of this episode with our friend Matthew Robertson. He has committed to be in space and time with us, consuming these liquids and podcasting. It'll follow a similar format to last year. I wanted to say there is going to be a supplementary piece of content, a supplementary item, if you will, that if you are a patron, you will receive or be eligible to receive. That's what I'm going to say. So if you've recently signed up for the Patreon and you're like on the fence, you're like, should I cancel after a month? I'm just going to put it out there that like it might be worth your while to stick around at least through August for Sipping Pitches 2.0. That's my sales pitch for you. How was that? Was that pretty good? Should I go door to door like you for Sutter Health?
Yes, you should. I'm hyped for this. Round 2, baby.
You love showing up to a place, aka my apartment, and being force-fed liquor and recorded.
You know, the appearances on this podcast would lead you to believe that I do love doing that. Yes.
Are you trying to imply that you don't love doing that?
I'm not
should we
trying
get away
to
from
imply
the drunken
anything.
episodes?
No, I'm very excited for this. We have a whole new roster of beverages to work through, and maybe a little special treat for us as well.
That's one way of thinking about it.
That is one way of thinking about it. We'll. I guess you've already revealed that we're doing that on the pod. So
yeah, the protein powder.
Yeah, that's true.
I'm gonna create some kind of fuck ass protein foam and put it on a cocktail. I don't know how.
Christ.
I'm gonna experiment with that over the next week. We're recording Sipping Pitches 2.0 in like 5 days. and not releasing it for like 2 months.
Yep. Yeah.
A lot of different behind the scenes reasons for that you guys don't need to know about, but that's the way we're moving over here, just so everybody knows.
Right. So if there's a liquor that drops between June and August, it's not canon.
Save it for next year.
Sorry. Yeah.
We're only repeating one liquor and one beer. I think everybody could probably guess what those two things are, but I won't spoil it.
Yeah.
Okay. So a couple more housekeeping things before we talk about the CBA. Cyclones meetup Friday, June 12th, 6:40 p.m. Link in the description. Your ticket gets you a drink credit, 2 hats. One is the giveaway and one is a hat for being part of a group order. The seat, you get to come to the game. Ticket to the game gets you a ticket to the game. I'm glad about that. And it gets you hours and hours of a good time, of good vibes with good people, hanging out, talking baseball. That's what we do. We talk baseball.
We do talk baseball.
Why don't we name the podcast that?
That was because that is what we do week in and week out, basically. We just sit down and talk ball.
Yeah, we talk a little baseball. Buy your tickets. It's coming up. The event's coming up. I mentioned this, I think, on the Patreon episode, but I'm going to mention it here on the public feed too. If you're interested in coming and affordability is a concern for you, just write us an email, typicpitchespod@gmail.com. We have some tickets that we can release and send your way. I would hate for someone to miss it just because of that, if you are really interested in coming. We got a lot of good submissions for MLB transit names.
Did we?
We got some throwback ones. Bushwick, Aberdeen.
Nice.
Pretty good.
Yeah.
We got that's from New York City. And then of course we got contacted by the London Bureau of the Tipping Pitches fan community, and we were informed that there were many that we did not know about. How about Brent Cross, Dallas Hill, Stamford Brook,
Yeah.
or Thaden Boyce?
Thaden Boyce.
Pretty good, right?
Yeah. I mean, he mostly came off the bench, but the fact that he was undersized, I did not hurt him on the field.
Bruce Grove, Hackney Wick, Cambridge Heath. These are good.
Mm-hmm.
I enjoy the London ones.
These are
might be better
really
than
good.
the New York ones.
I think they are.
And we have some Manchester submissions too. We got shooters out there in the UK, just so everybody knows. We're like a drill rapper. We got shooters out in the UK. Ashton Moss, Clayton Hall, Oldham Mumps.
That might be the winner.
Oldham Mumps, everybody. Oldham Mumps. Okay. Where to begin? Collective bargaining. We know it. We love it. We've done about 500 episodes of this podcast between the main feed and Patreon. I would say we've talked about collective bargaining. Not just labor, we've talked about collective bargaining in about 200 of those episodes. This is the lens through which we look at Major League Baseball, and this was the main story, in my estimation, of the last week of Major League Baseball. We got a proposal from the Players Association to kick off bargaining, a formal proposal, which we briefly discussed on Patreon and we'll discuss in more depth here. And we got a counter proposal as a starting point from the MLB ownership side.
Yeah. And shockingly, they were basically the same. I mean,
we wrapped it up.
We did it, folks. We can go home early.
I'm going to read some tweets, a pastime here on the podcast, from our friend and noted labor carer abouter, Jeff Passan. The MLB-PA made its first proposal to MLB today. This was May 27th. In collective bargaining, among the top line issues, a competitive integrity tax for any team that does not spend $150 million. Sounds a lot like a soft floor. Mm-hmm. Increased minimum salary from $780,000 to $1.5 million. Increase in base CBT, that's competitive balance tax threshold, to from $244 million to $300 million. Changes to the revenue sharing system that would distribute more money from local television revenue, but decrease the amount distributed from the in-stadium revenue to incentivize that teams win and draw larger crowds. And free agency for players who are 30 at 5 years of service. This is kind of a complicated one, but in the interest of not getting too in the weeds, let's look at MLB's proposal. This is from Jesse Rogers over at ESPN. Breaking, as expected, MLB proposed a hard salary cap to union officials today as part of the next CBA. The salary floor for teams beginning in 2027 would be set at $171.2 million, which includes player benefits, with the ceiling at $245.3 million. This would, after further reading into the reporting around this proposal, this is allegedly a 50-50 revenue split between the players and the owners. We'll talk about what that means. What revenue are we talking about? What revenue are we referring to, everyone? And it would supposedly include an independent audit of MLB's revenue by the Players Association. That they would choose sort of financial auditors to be able to look into this revenue to make sure that this was actual revenue that they were making from baseball-related activities. That was a lot of details and a decent amount of numbers. And so I'm going to stop talking now, and I want to hear what your immediate reaction was to this set of two proposals.
Well, I mean, my first reaction was we finally got it. We finally got the cap that we've been talking about for years, right? This is the first time that the ownership side has proposed a cap since that fated year of 1994. I think we all know what happened next. I mean, candidly, there was nothing in here that I think you and I did not expect to see coming, right? We sort of expected that the Players Association would propose a soft floor. We knew that the only way that ownership would agree to any sort of floor is with a cap, and so that's what we have here. Notably, this cap sits where the luxury tax sits right now, right? So there was essentially no increase into the amount of money that teams would be allowed to spend. I also think it's really interesting, and we can talk about sort of how each side responded to the other side's proposal. But I think the interesting thing here is that both sides are sort of using the Dodgers as their example. And it might be good or it might be bad, but the Dodgers are exhibit A right here, right? And the union is pointing to the Dodger spending as proof that other teams are not spending nearly enough, right? If the Dodgers can do it, why can't other folks? And the league is pointing to the Dodgers and saying, look, the union's proposal is going to give them $70 million more and leave the small. Sorry, well,
close one. Close one. We almost got something checked off the bingo card right there.
Anyway, I do think it's fascinating how much this entire negotiation is centered on the Dodgers, because it feels a little bit like it's missing the forest for the trees. But I don't know. I guess I'll turn it back to you to see if there's a perspective you're taking on this that differs from how I'm looking at it. I mean, is there something I'm missing here? We can talk about the 50-50 revenue split and the centralizing of local TV revenues, which was a sort of interesting angle to MLB's proposal. I don't know. There's so much to chew on here. I feel like a kid in a candy store.
I know. There's like a million different ways that we can go with this. I share your sentiment that I'm not surprised by the proposal. I will say that I think that their positioning of the cap floor proposal is quite savvy.
Yeah.
I think that leading with a $171.2 million floor and a $245.3 million cap, which, by the way, is too far apart, probably based on how the other sports leagues run their operation. Now, they would say there's still room for negotiation. There's room for the cap to go up. We just started at this point. It tells you a lot about how they think about the CBT as a soft cap, basically. Mm-hmm. That they would propose a cap that is essentially right at the line of the current competitive balance tax. The broad strokes of it are strokes that feel fair They feel fair to MLB fans when they just see them laid out like this. Here's the cap. Here's the floor. You got to spend up to this point if you want to be an MLB team, and you can't spend over this point because it's unfair to the Cleveland Guardians or Tampa Bay Rays or whatever. 50-50 split, 50-50 split. Sounds fair, right? Sounds pretty fair. Unpacking what it actually means to determine what revenue we're splitting is like the most complicated question in collective bargaining for the other 3 American professional sports leagues. And this is why all 3 of those professional sports leagues players unions would tell you that they would be in a much better position if they did not have that hard cap, because the hard cap suddenly makes what you can fight over a much more narrow conversation. You can fight over what baseball revenue actually is, and that's pretty much it. That is the only meaningful change that you can make to determine whether or not players get more money or less money of the pie. And the pie is not going to change, because the pie is how much money that the teams are bringing in total. And the players don't really have a ton to do with that. The owners decide how much money the teams are bringing in total at scale. I mean, the players facilitate that value by existing, which is why you could argue that there really shouldn't be owners in this equation. I'm saying all of this stuff in an almost sort of like rudimentary way because this is the first time we're having this conversation in a while. And I imagine that we've picked up some listeners along the way, but these principles and our stance on them has not changed basically since we started doing this podcast. This is now our 3rd CBA negotiation that we've gone through in the time of doing the show. Second one that we've covered so closely. I think the first one we were a little bit more green when it came to understanding these economic issues and how they play out at the bargaining table. I find it notable that I think 12 or 13 teams, I did this math wrong at first because I was looking at the wrong column of Fangraphs roster resource, that more than a third of the league, we'll say, is currently below and or well below, like a full standard deviation below the current floor. Because that to me feels like the crux of the issue. The Dodgers are an interesting scapegoat and I think an interesting political football, narrative football, for lack of a better phrase, in this discussion. But the Dodgers, to me, are more of a red herring. To me, the unhealthiest part of the league is that bottom third that claims that they could never spend to get up to the number that even MLB proposed themselves in the first negotiation for the floor. So where is that money coming from? Is the money then coming from centralizing all of the revenue more aggressively? At which point I would say, why do the big market owners want that? Why do they want to get pulled back down by the smaller market teams to have a smaller league? You have to have a smaller pie. You're being held back. Your speed is being inhibited by the teams that claim that they can't possibly run their business any better when the onus was on them to run their business better. Now, what you're doing is you're agreeing to help them run their business better by giving them more of the money that the league generates in total. And I think that that's actually even a nice concept to think about in theory, but let's think about it in practice. Let's look at the people who are now going to get much, much, much bigger revenue sharing checks and wonder whether or not they're actually going to put a good product onto the field.
Yeah.
You setting a salary floor to go along with your cap does not mean you're going to get significantly better baseball from all of the teams who don't really care about winning. And the sort of unspoken part of this, which actually got spoken in a story written by Evan Drellick at The Athletic, is that that's not the main goal of the owners with these proposals. The main goal of the owners with this proposal is to increase their franchise value. It's essentially a question of accounting, to operational expenditure of running your organization. And if it is defined tighter and more predictable over a longitudinal period of time, then that means that franchise values could in theory increase should national revenue for the game also increase, because that means that all 30 teams are getting more valuable rather than just the ones that run a good business like the Dodgers, the Yankees, Mets, Padres, etc. Red Sox, a bunch of other teams who sell out, who actually have diversified revenue streams, who don't just sit there and rely on their check to come in every month.
Yeah.
To me, when I see what MLB owners have proposed, I see them propose a way for it to be easier to try less to put a winning baseball team on the field. And that's it. That's it. Because now you actually have to try. You actually have to compete with the Dodgers. You have to actually choose which players to invest your resources in. You have to actually have a meaningfully growing relationship with your fan base so that they continue to come to the game, so that you get more of your gate revenue, which you actually get to keep a bigger piece of, so that you can put it back onto the field. But that's just not what the owners want to do, which is why they propose something that is much easier and much less creative.
Yeah, I mean, I do want to be clear here. We make our stance very clear, but to your point, the audience has grown. What the league is doing here is fixing wages, right? That's what a cap does. It is the buyer side setting the price of labor and suppressing the money you have to pay to them. Yeah. If in any other industry, right? If the 30 companies who made up that industry got together and said, this is the maximum price we will pay an engineer or whatever, we'd be like, interesting. That sounds like a violation of an antitrust clause. Major League Baseball can do that, right? That is functionally, I mean,
it's more complicated than that.
It's more complicated than that. They cannot sit here and say we are fixing wages, and obviously it's collectively bargained. So,
correct. Which is what you reserve the right to forfeit that particular protection under antitrust laws when you collectively bargain over it. But yes,
of course, yes,
you would never collectively bargain against this many different companies under one collective bargaining agreement. There are 30 franchises, or 30 different multiple billion-dollar businesses, and they're collectively bargaining against MLB, which is where the trust comes into play. Like the Teamsters don't bargain against every truck driving company. They bargain contracts for each individual truck driving company.
Mm-hmm.
Probably the closest thing is Hollywood, where they come together with 6 studios and they collectively bargain minimums, but that's a minimum basic agreement, not a collective bargaining agreement. And these are much, 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 much different legal documents, because that's just they are bargaining over the floor of everything, and the ceiling is not capped in any way, shape, or form. We only have salary caps in sports leagues for some reason.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And to your point, like, franchise values continue to appreciate in ways that embarrass the stock market, right? I mean, like, the returns that these franchisors are receiving are incredible. And so suppressing the wages that you have to pay to labor is like, that's only going to contribute to that. So
what I fail to understand about the hard cap and the hard floor is genuinely, like, what does that accomplish? I mean, I know what it accomplishes. It accomplishes what you're talking about. It accomplishes very, very defined wages for your labor pool. And so therefore you can turn to people who evaluate the financial value of your business, and you can say, I know I will not have to pay more than this, no matter what, no matter whether the free market goes off or not. Like, this is what we are going to pay over the next 7 years. So you can rely on the operational expenditure of my business because of this. But from a competitive balance standpoint, which is the thing that they keep throwing that phrase back out, that fans want more competitive balance. The fans want more parity. Fans want their team to feel like they have a chance. I don't really see how this addresses that in a way that the union's proposal doesn't address it better.
Correct.
Having a tax of not hitting the floor. In that case, you're penalizing the businesses, the owners who can't run their own business. You're actually saying, like, time to pull yourself up by your bootstraps, dude. It's time to put your money where your mouth is. You are the capital side. You are the side that is supposed to be able to run this business most efficiently. And if you can't, it's a dog-eat-dog world out there in capitalism, man. Sell it to someone who can. And by the way, what do you get for the losers, Judge? You get $1.3 billion in profit since you bought the team. Wow, it's a decent consolation prize for not winning every year. It's fine. You're going to be okay. Sell it to somebody who can run it. And if that person can't run it, they sell it to someone else. That's just how businesses work in America. Again, back to the whole conversation that we always have on this podcast. If you don't want businesses to be run that way, we can talk about that. I'm okay. If you want to socialize America, we could talk about that. But instituting a sort of socialized profit model with capped wages in a private industry, with the rest of the economy around it remaining this kind of free market dog eat dog business world out there is akin to just giving handouts to the small market owners. They're just handouts. It's just a handout. The NBA is run by a bunch of dudes who just cash their handouts from national TV contracts and the Lakers and Knicks. That is why there are allegations every year that Adam Silver or whoever runs the NBA wants to put the biggest market teams and rigs the games via the refs to have the big market teams win in the playoffs, is because the whole business relies upon the fact that those teams make it into the nationally televised games so that the ratings are better, so that they can continue to make enough revenue to make this wheel go round. If that's the system that you want in MLB, I think you're kind of crazy. Like, I think that's actually a crazy thing to sign up for. The regionalized version that we have now is actually more sustainable in the long term because franchise values aren't the only thing that we care about. We actually do care about like being able to run your team and debt leveraging and servicing that debt. Like, that actually matters more under this system that we currently have, convoluted though it is. And in the other version of this system, we take away all of those external pressures. We take away all of those responsibilities from the owners.
Yeah, I don't see how competitive balance is really inherent at all to the ownership side here. It does feel like the union's proposal is the one with more of a spending mandate. And so, I mean, it begs the question, right? If the ultimate goal here is competitive balance, and I'm not sure if that is, like, your mileage may vary on that as a fan of whether or not that's important to you. I don't necessarily think it's the most important thing to me, but if that's the goal here, it again begs the question of why the answer to that is a ceiling on labor earnings rather than like tying revenue sharing to actual spending, right? Like, or having your payroll be some measure of percentage of overall, baseball and non-baseball revenues or something like that. Like, it's a Trojan horse for something far more sinister that benefits the ownership class, which is getting to net all of the excess revenues that they don't have to put back into their payroll.
And being the only one to participate in the upside of increased franchise valuation.
Even though
it's not,
yes,
even though it's not keeping a pace with what they would like it to do in their fantasy land, it is still going up year over year. And like you said, putting a shame to the rest of the market because it's rigged. I mean, sports leagues are a rigged system. They're an incredibly rigged system. And they do generate extreme value in the economy, undoubtedly. Like, there's a reason that billions and billions and billions of dollars go into these industries. But to look at this labor fight and think that reason is the ownership side, I mean, I just don't understand how you even get to that point. And so why they should be able to move the pieces on the chessboard around as they see fit to make franchise valuations. Why the fuck would anyone care about that?
Yeah, why do I care about that?
I don't care what the Yankees are valued at. I mean, the Sportico freaks of the world are obsessed with things like that. The like Forbes. I know. And I mean, I care about it from the perspective of we do this podcast every week. But when I'm at a fucking Mets game, I don't care that Steve Cohen paid $2.4 billion, which is less than the Padres paid. Who cares? Yeah. Who gives a shit? Who gives a shit about any of this? Who cares if the owners make any money from this endeavor? Mm-hmm. I don't care about that. And I certainly don't care if they feel like they're making their share of the pie. Like, you guys are good. You guys are fine. You guys like own Walmart, like you guys own, the most profitable private equity groups in the world. Why would I care about whether you make money from baseball?
Yeah.
And okay, a couple other things, because these are common misconceptions that come up every time we have like a big labor conversation. None of this has anything to do with ticket prices. None of this has anything to do with merchandise prices. If it becomes less quote unquote expensive for owners to buy the labor of their players, they are not going to turn that extra money that they got out of that and put it towards making things cheaper for you. You know how I know that? Because they've never done that in any other industry in the history of America.
But Ronald Reagan said it would trickle down. I'm any minute now, honestly, seriously.
I see. Hold on. I'm looking at
my hand out the window. Yeah.
And I see actually it's on its way. The profits of trickle-down economics are being carried to me by a carrier pigeon that is flying right at my window right now. They charge what they think you will pay. And if all of a sudden everybody stopped paying for jerseys or tickets, they would charge less. That's how the economy works. That's how the market works on that front.
Mm-hmm.
They're uncorrelated. They might appear correlated for short periods of time if you look at the Mets getting good because they spent more on payroll and then more people coming to the game, so there's increased demand, so they raise the price of tickets and they raise the price of jerseys. That might appear like a correlation for a little bit, but then when the Mets get bad and demand goes back down, they don't start charging less for jerseys. They keep it the same. They just choose in certain moments to increase that price to reset the expectation for that market.
Mm-hmm.
This is how market economics work. That's not how labor economics work.
We got Thomas Friedman at home right here, folks.
So that's one thing. The second thing is, no matter how clever you think you are at home, whether you just started caring about these things because you read the article that Jeff Passan wrote in ESPN, or you just heard about CBA negotiations for the first time, or whether you're you and me on this podcast, you don't know what the fight over what baseball revenue will look like in 5 or 10 years. You don't know it. You just don't know. You don't know whether or not there will be some additional revenue stream that comes into the game that is caused by the existence of Major League Baseball, but that is not directly attributable or calculatable by the people who are quote unquote auditing or bargaining over baseball related revenue. And so what you sign up yourself up for by doing this, by agreeing to a cap and a floor that is splitting 50-50, this unknowable amount of money, what you sign yourself up for is arguing about what that amount of money is to the end of time. Is revenue that the Ricketts make by owning the things around Wrigley Field baseball related revenue? Is selling gambling ads baseball related revenue? Are radio ads baseball related revenue?
Mm-hmm. Is all the foot traffic from the Battery, is that baseball related revenue?
Is a future app that MLB creates, such as, for example, MLB Advanced Media, that gets sold, is that baseball related revenue?
Is this podcast baseball related revenue?
Like, we're doing a little bit of like the Nick Mullen, Tucker Carlson affectation.
Right, yeah.
What's going on? My answer, as someone who cares about labor but also economics, is that it's all baseball related revenue.
Right.
But
Would
what
it
the
have
owners will
existed
do,
if the 30 teams did not exist? If the answer is no, then it's baseball related revenue.
correct. What the owners will do is they will repeatedly make the claim that it's not baseball related, and they will badger the union over the course of decades to say that it's not baseball related. And when the union finally wins that argument, the economics of the situation will have so far outpaced what they're arguing about that the owners will have been pocketing this profit in the meantime. That's what they've been doing with competitive balance tax and revenue sharing for the last 25 years on a smaller scale because there are stronger inhibitions to them doing that. But make no mistake, that is what they will do. And if they fail at arguing about what's baseball related, they will just lie. They will just lie about what's baseball related and what's not. And they will use fancy accounting tricks, which no matter how independent and comprehensive the auditing of is, you can't really account for the borderline criminal activity that billionaires can get away with by hiding their finances. We are aware of this throughout the rest of society, so there's no reason that we should forget it when it comes to baseball. Yeah. They will just lie and hide their money so that they continue to make more money and more profit. There have been so many grievances from the union about them already doing this. So I don't know why we would think they would suddenly get really nice and cool about it, about turning over their books to everybody who asks.
Yeah.
So that this becomes a more fair system.
I really don't get the sentiment of anyone. We've had a lot of people in our mentions over the last week.
Sorry about that.
It's, it is what it is.
I know. I should have known better.
But, there's a lot of folks out there. Every time it shocks me. There's a staggering amount of people who are like, well, the players should just stop whining, or yeah, that, they have an antitrust exemption as it should be. If any of those folks, if anyone can tell me why I should care whatsoever about what the owners get out of this, I'm willing to listen. If anyone could tell me why the players should not receive 100% of the revenue from baseball and the owners should receive a handshake and a pat on the back, whatever it is. I'm obviously being a little flippant about this, but I tune in to watch the guys in tight pants run around and swing the bat, you know? I've said this before, but if Phil Castellini can get out there and hit 95 miles an hour, we can have a discussion about what he deserves to earn.
Yeah. Or conversely, if Phil Castellini could prove to me that he runs the Reds so much better than the replacement level business hack who inherited something from his dad, then fine. But they can't, because they know that they are not running the business well. They are running the business in a manner through which they will profit the most individually. Them as individual human beings will profit the most, not the business. We've seen this by the fact that we've looked at how poorly all of these fucking teams are run and they have no money, quote unquote. They have where'd the money go? Because if you handed most, first year Harvard MBAs these businesses with these margins, I think they'd be able to run it all right. I think they'd be able to keep it healthy. Oh, you guys just have increasing profits every year, increasing revenues as a industry, just keeps going up. I don't know. Look at the rest of the world. We have bigger fluctuations and bigger problems to deal with, and yet businesses persist. Yet you guys somehow can't run a fucking business that just line go up every year.
Mm-hmm. I think this is the impetus I need to create war for owners. Where is
wins above replacement?
Wins above
different kind of war than I usually think about for owners,
and also war on owners. But
these guys are the smartest businessmen of our time, Alex. They're supposed to be the smartest businessmen of our time, and they can't run businesses that rake in billions and billions of dollars every year reliably. You could do some dumb shit for a long time as an owner of a sports team, and people will still show up dressed like you. And they'll dress their kids like you.
Yeah.
And they'll bring their kids, and then their kids will get really excited, and then their kids will pass that on to their generation. I love the New York Times as much as the next guy, but I don't think you and I are going to be dressing up our kids in New York Times shirts and bringing them to live writings of New York Times articles.
Just wait.
I love Coca-Cola as much as the next guy, but I'm not going to the Coca-Cola facility to watch it get bottled and cheering.
But maybe we should, honestly. For the service that those laborers are performing for this country.
You guys have the easiest business in human history to run.
Yeah.
You could do pretty much nothing and print money every year, and even still they whine. Even still they constantly just moan about how hard it is to run these businesses. Just get out, dude. Just get out.
Or open the books. Show us.
Correct. Yes.
Honestly, you can either complain that it's so hard to run this business by showing us the evidence of why it's so hard to run this business, or you can shut up and dribble. I'm sorry. You can't do both.
Shut up and fill out the Excel spreadsheet,
Yeah, exactly. Shut up and sign checks. I don't know what to tell you. Shut up. You have one job, and it's not to be heard.
Owners are better seen, not heard. We should put that on a t-shirt.
We should.
Oh God. Anything else from this that you want to dig into? We have a whole year to really get into the specifics of any proposals and the directions that they go.
Yeah, look, this is already a long episode. As you noted, we have many, many months to get into the weeds here. I am sort of interested in the rapid expansion of the pre-arb bonus pool, which essentially tripled in the union's proposal. They're trying again to propose the 5-year free agency path for like late bloomer stars. I don't know. There are a lot of, dare I say that the union is doing some creative thinking coming up with some creative solutions to a lot of these existential problems. And I don't know. I'm curious to see sort of where all this nets out in the context of a cap proposal, which is obviously the sort of existential crisis that the union is pushing back against. So no, in other words, I have nothing more to say on this.
Since this is the first time that we're officially talking about this, now that bargaining has begun, I want to get you on the record. Salary cap, yes or no? Do you think there will be one? Not if you would want one. I think we're well established on that question.
I think no. A hard cap in the way that it's been proposed, I don't think that happens. I think we get maybe a tightening of the luxury cap or of the luxury tax, but if you're Bruce Meyer, I don't know how you ever show your face in public again after agreeing to a cap. Like that's
after taking over the union like 3 months before these
3 months
negotiations
and then
started.
giving up on the one existential issue the union has drawn.
Marvin Miller
red
died
line
fighting against.
literally. I don't know. Maybe that's giving Meyer too much credit, but I have to think that it's like you got to hold the line. If nothing else, you got to hold the line on this. Is today's generation of players like frankly radicalized enough to miss months of games over this? I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's what we should continue to talk about. I mean, the underlying efficacy of the proposals ultimately, though, is good, though that's good for conversation fodder and good for us to be the ones to unpack on podcasts, matters much, much less than leverage at the bargaining table in terms of how the CBA actually unfolds.
Yeah.
You could sit there and talk to your blue in the face about what is actually true, what is logistical, what under a microscope stands up to reason when it comes to the finances of baseball or an industry or any labor contract. What the contract actually ends up looking like is only a function of how much leverage you're able to create on the labor side via solidarity or on the ownership side via guile, audacity, fearlessness in blowing up your whole industry. These are the things that matter when it comes to bargaining. And these are the things that we will continue to talk about.
It's a pretty precarious position for ownership to take. Like,
I feel less certain that there won't be a salary cap than I did before I formally saw their proposal, because they seemed like they're proposing this like, this is what we're doing. This is what we do.
I know.
Like they didn't even feign a whole like we get 60-40 of the revenue and we'll bargain you down to 50-50. They're just like, we're going 50-50. This is what we're proposing and we're going to stick to this. That was surprising to me. As someone who's been in the room, whenever you see a number where it's like they're not going to go below this number, I can't imagine that they will agree to get less than 50% of the revenue. It's a little freaky when you see someone set a hard line at the beginning of bargaining.
When it's like, this is, Well, if it makes a difference, the odds on Polymarket have not changed. We still have a 40% chance of a CBA by December 1st.
Stop. I keep forgetting about this. It's really the same tab that you have open?
It's literally the same tab I have.
Okay. All right. Let's put a pin in this for future discussion and move on to our conversation with our friend Bradford William Davis. I wanted to say quickly up top. So if you don't follow Bradford, if you haven't been following his work over at iBlack, that's readiblack.com. Bradford launched this newsletter to write stories that he felt are being underrepresented at national media outlets because of these media outlets either being compromised or understaffed or hit hard by, headwinds of journalism, et cetera, et cetera. So he's been reporting for the last couple of months on the domestic violence investigations that MLB has conducted into players past and present. Mike Clevenger, Jeurys Familia, Jose Reyes, on and on. And he's been both investigating in his reporting the details of these specific cases, but also just the process that MLB approaches these cases each time one is sort of comes across their desk. So that was kind of the conversation that we had. I will say that these are deeply upsetting topics. It's not fun to talk about or read about. but it's incredibly important because, we've just spent the last however long that segment ultimately ends up being discussing how MLB positions itself on economic questions. And though these investigations ultimately have a sheen of legality to them or a sheen of morality to how MLB tries to carry themselves or market these investigations, ultimately they are kind of they're kind of economic questions about whether MLB decides that it can enforce these rules and suspend a player and prevent the teams from paying them money. And that, though a little crass and hard to talk about, is honestly how MLB thinks about these investigations. I don't get the sense from the Rob Manfred administration or from other sports leagues, frankly, I don't think that they're unique in this sense, that morality or legality is something that they even feel it's their responsibility to mete out. I think that they are trying to follow the rules that they have collectively bargained in the CBA about these policies and protect themselves as business entities and business organizations, because that's what they are at the end of the day. They're not a court system, from risk. And that is that's kind of what we talked about, but also at the same time, we do kind of get into the details of some of these cases. So if that's not something that you want to listen to, I totally do not begrudge that.
Yeah, as Bobby said, we get into some pretty harrowing details here. So if that's not something you're in the headspace for, we recommend you skip ahead.
Skip ahead to the end of the episode.
To the end of the episode. Yeah,
skip ahead
to the outro. Yeah. I guess I'll just say that the National Domestic Violence Hotline is 1-800-799-7233. You can call or text 988 any time. We'll put those in the show notes. With that, should we get to our conversation with Bradford?
Yeah, let's do it. Bradford William Davis is here. Hello, Bradford. I think this is appearance, if my math is correct, 5 or 6 for you on the Tipping Pitches podcast. How does it feel? 5 times?
I was going to say 4.
I think that, if we count all of your all gift draft appearances, I think that bumps it up a little bit, which those do count. You've done some great work on our many, many ridiculous podcast formats over the years.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I definitely remember before the 2020 season saying that Trevor Bauer, or 2021 season, had Trevor Bauer would have the most interesting GIF.
Yes.
And then his career ended for, to be clear, entirely valid and good reasons.
Not your best called shot. Not your best called shot.
I was hoping he would just be racist and dumb, right. But not replacing the C with the P, allegedly, based on the testimonies of multiple people.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully your appearance on this podcast does not portend another world shutdown for 2 years, like a few years back.
right.
When you were the last person we talked to before Rudy Gobert was taken out of an NBA game.
I think Rudy Gobert was taken out before.
Yeah, we were just
because we were like deeply.
We were like, that's crazy that happened. Right?
Yeah. We were deeply concerned, all of us. I think it was just true end of the world vibes. So yeah, that's what created the spirit of that wonderful time capsule in Tipping Pitches history. No, I'm good, man. I'm good. I do not have hantavirus, nor does anyone in my immediate community have that. So, shout out to diseases that can only happen when you stick your hand in someone else's body. Like the
New York Mets' favorite disease, hand, foot, and mouth disease.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Yeah, no Mets don't go on any cruises.
That would be an extremely Mets thing to do. Like Jorge Polanco's rehabbing his Achilles on a cruise right now, and they come back. Bro, now that I've put that idea out in the world, that's alarming. Okay, I'm probably going to bleep that whole segment.
Bro, I'm so happy to be here. As you know, I'm a fan of y'all and fan of getting the opportunity to talk about talk in a hopefully entertaining way about sad things that happen in our sport, which is a Tipping Pitches promise. So
yes, a long running goal of ours is talk entertainingly about things that are slightly heavier topics than most baseball podcasts are willing to approach. Bradford, you've been doing a series on your wonderful newsletter, iBlack. This is just one of many times that I will plug iBlack. here on this podcast appearance. You've been doing a series on MLB and their relationship to domestic violence cases as they arise, their approach to how they investigate them, how they mete out punishment when they deem it necessary. Big asterisk on when they deem it necessary there. You started with a couple part series on the Mike Clevenger investigation from a few years back, which has still not led to a suspension for Mike Clevenger. There's also been reporting on that you've done on Juris Familia, the Mets, or I believe the Rockies' approach to the Jose Reyes investigation. A lot of different wide ranging reporting that you've done on this. I thought it might be useful to start this conversation just by defining the principal figures here and who is important when it comes to these investigations. The MLB's Department of Investigations. What is it? Who's on it? How many people are it? It's sort of a shadowy cabal in my mind.
Yeah, man. So the Department of Investigations, the DOI, it is a group of former cops and prosecutors, all within the Office of the Commissioner. So Rob Manfred is, as always, a character in a Tip and Pitches podcast, but certainly within the stories I've been telling. Former law enforcement, former prosecutors. They come in with, a certain set of skills with which to find the information that they believe they need with, to this is a charitable sort of summation to make a reasoned, sound, and informed judgment on allegations of misconduct in a variety of forms. It's not just domestic violence either. So, for example, when there is a gambling probe, the DOI is on it. When Alex Rodriguez had all his biogenesis steroid stuff, the DOI was kind of more infamously on it. But certainly they also adjudicate or help adjudicate the violence against women, intimate partners, children, whoever it may be, and help the league come to a decision as to whether or not someone should be disciplined, and if so, what the terms of discipline should be.
When you have been sort of chasing this story, this sort of big overarching story, and then some of the individual threads for a while. And I think you even note that, the Clevenger case goes back, I think, 6 or 7 years, right, to when the first sort of allegations came out. I mean, can
I interject there?
Please,
the allegations go back to 2012, when he was a young, recent draft pick, and in the Los Angeles Angels system. The allegations go that far back, but some of the more publicized ones start in 2019. So yes,
yes,
7-8 years, I guess, or sorry, 7 years. Mm-hmm.
No, that's an important point of clarification, I think, in this narrative. And I mean the thesis of sort of this series, as it were, it seems to sort of be internal contradictions, right? In Major League Baseball's like process, like the I mean, I don't know. I guess I'm sort of curious, what it looks like as a freelance reporter who's sort of out reporting the league itself on these things. I mean, when you hold these cases up next to each other, I mean, do you see just a bias toward result? Is it incompetence? I mean, how do you sort of start to put all of these pieces together that sort of seem like MLB is addressing them in sort of one-off cases?
The short, boring answer is that we don't know for sure whether it is incompetence or unintentional incompetence, or perhaps willful negligence, or if something even more sinister than that. Right? We don't know for sure. However, what I have been trying to do is to basically understand how these things work so that I could set a baseline of what the league does to see if there is evidence of them going above and beyond, in those cases, or below, or what's the opposite of above and below, below and, I don't know.
I don't know what the opposite of beyond
is. Is there an opposite of beyond?
It's whatever we do sometimes on the Patreon episodes where we just come in and we're not really sure what's going to happen.
Yeah. Anyway, I don't have my thesaurus in front of me. So, but you get the point. Times where MLB does not seem to put in the same amount of effort and elbow grease with which to find out if harm was done by one of his players or whoever is being, investigated or probed. And so with the Clevenger case in particular, the thing that really piqued my interest was that MLB, more than other sports leagues, typically does administer some sort of discipline or punishment when someone is confirmed to be under investigation. To my knowledge, understanding, and to be clear, I want to qualify it a bit in that, MLB does not keep a running total of their investigations public. Wikipedia's list is incomplete. Some of it's, again, my own sort of searching to make sure that I have, every investigation, at least since they created their current joint domestic violence, sexual assault, child abuse policy, which by the way, and I will be invoking this name a lot, was a direct response to the Ray Rice scandal in the NFL. And that's not my conjecture, but that is actually what league executives, the current, deputy commissioner, Dan Halem, said, like, hey, we want to do this so we don't have a Ray Rice situation. I'm paraphrasing, but that is a gist of what was said. And anyway, so since then, which is about 2015, there's only like 4 cases where someone was investigated, confirmed under investigation, and yet was not disciplined. Mike Clevenger was one of those 4. And that just struck me as interesting, which is what led me to start looking into it. And I started speaking to some of the people who he dated. And I learned that it was not a he said, she said, but like a he said, she said, she said, she said, she said, so it's a long list of people who claim some form of, domestic abuse by this man. And so they were confused, upset, frustrated that despite there seems to be a preponderance evidence of misconduct in their view, that yet nothing was done. And so so that kind of like led me on basically this journey of like, well, how do these things work? Because it sure seems like there's a lot of proof of things that this player had been doing that were by my read of the policy violations. And then not only that, but there were things that he was accused of doing afterward that after the suspension was over. After the investigation was done, that seemed to be, again, additional evidence that he may have been continuing to harm the women in his life. And so so I'm like, okay, so what's the process? They won't tell you. So I had to try and find other ways we should do that. And of course, part of that is the testimony interviews, but I'd be happy to walk you through more of the process that I think I've been able to break some really fresh ground in as far as understanding, again, how these things work or don't work.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad that you used the word process, because I think that, the joint domestic violence policy is very clearly outlined in the CBA. Like, you can read it right now. Anyone who's listening to this can read the exact policy that they agreed to with the Players Association. What is less clear to me, and what I think your reporting is peeling the layers of the onion back on, is like, when there is an alleged violation of that policy, what is the process that is put into place to determine what actually happened and whether the violation occurred? Because that is not outlined in the CBA. The MLB and the commissioner's office don't say, here's what we will do to discover evidence. And they also don't say, here's how Rob Manfred will determine whether or not to enforce this. They just say, here's what we agree that you're not allowed to do. And then the punishment. And I think what you mentioned, like what you discovered through the extended reporting that you've done on the Clevenger story in particular, it doesn't really make a lot of sense when you put it up in comparison to how MLB decided to suspend, for example, Juris Familia for 15 games. Like, there are things that happened in the Clevenger story that is known to MLB and is now known to the public that are probably on par with what Rob Manfred said publicly about why he punished Juris Familia, for example. So can you just sort of, like, to the best of your knowledge, like, when MLB receives one of these allegations and starts an investigation, like, what does the process actually look like? I'm talking like, how fast does it happen? How many people do they start calling police stations? Do they start like individually calling people? Because I'm personally fascinated. The reason for this question, I'm personally fascinated at how sometimes they rely on the criminal justice system to sort of like mete out the responsibility or the blame or the justice. And sometimes they're like, we're doing this on our own, a sort of independent investigation. That's what it feels like from the outside. But is that true or not?
Yeah, I mean, like one of the things that in theory helps these investigations is that because they are also crimes in many situations, there is interaction with law enforcement.
Mm-hmm.
And through that, you can get some corroboration of evidence. This is, just my, sort of a little bit of my conjecture here, but but again, I think it follows logically, right? Well, if you're going to search for evidence, well, maybe the cops said something or saw something. And so they pursue records from law enforcement when there is a, known sort of like run-in with the cops. And they appear to at times heavily leverage the relationships and authority of being former law enforcement, whether being police or FBI or whatever. And they have people who have been both to help smooth that process out. And so to I guess sort of consolidate what I'm saying here is if there's reason to believe that the cops might have been involved, they will call the relevant department. Or send a public records request, just as journalists do, asking for the incident report.
Theirs probably get answered faster and have fewer redactions than yours do, I would imagine.
Perhaps I don't know.
More conjecture, but I would. Guess.
I have no evidence towards that end of I guess fewer redactions at default. Though again, the Jose Reyes situation is one which we should discuss as as something more to your point of maybe they get a little more than the rest of the public does. But anyway, they go and they get these incident reports and that is part of I guess their case file when they're trying to determine whether or not someone did something. And so in the Clevenger situation, what I was able to find was that I was not the only person that had requested the police records from an altercation between his ex-fiance and him and San Diego while he's a member of the Padres, where she alleged that she was choked by him and also locked out of her home. And so there is like a report that says domestic violence strangulation. And so that is, part of what MLB appears to have had access to, given that they put in a request just like I did, just like also like, the New York Times and like ESPN and a few other places that were looking at this at the time. And, and so they saw that to use one example of like kind of like a baseline level of effort that, that goes on top of like, supposedly interviewing the parties involved, including the player, which is something that's always happened. They always do an interview with the player. That's like a CBA, negotiated thing, as well as, the person who, or at least they attempt to interview the person who came forward with the allegations, and then other alleged witnesses as well.
One of the, I think more interesting editorial threads here across all of these stories, and this is something that has come up in your reporting and other folks' reporting as well, is I guess the sort of like imperfect victim narrative, right? The league uses Olivia Feinstead, Clevenger's ex-partner, her text to Clevenger as, quote, part of the reason that they choose not to discipline him, right? There's a
right. So with the Clevenger situation in particular, we have, you have a very public, vocal, woman claiming that she was harmed by him. Mm-hmm. Like she, the reason why anyone even knew about the investigation while it was happening is because she was posting about it on her Instagram account, which led to, I think The Athletic, was the first to like confirm with MLB. Yes, they were under investigation. I should say Clevenger was under investigation. And so, so she was very public. She was very loud in a way that, she claims the league told her, please don't do that. Please don't talk about this. We like to keep things private. Surprise, surprise. And good, to clear, there are good reasons to not want to have things out in the open like that. But but she claims that they were very upset with her for being so open and vocal about what she was going through. When one of the things that she claimed the league confronted her about were text messages that she sent during the investigation, but after they broke up. To Mike, these text messages, exist in the public record because Mike used them to actually successfully get a restraining order after the investigation was complete, like very shortly after. He used those text messages to successfully get a restraining order against her. And so, MLB. So she says that MLB was used that as part of the reason why they decided not to pursue disciplinary action. But then what I got, which I think is really, really different than kind of any reporting I've seen on investigations so far, and because I've not seen the entire encyclopedia of sports probes here, but I have a recording that she alleges is of the current top investigator, a woman named Maura Weinberg. She, again, another former prosecutor. She's a very high ranking executive. Sits you're very close to the commissioner's office and Manfred, and is the one who kind of delivers recommendations as to what should be done. And so in this recording where Weinberg is telling Olivia what the league is decided to do, she does two things. One is she blames Olivia. At least, and actually, let me sprinkle in allegedly, right? It's an alleged recording, but for what it's worth, I do not believe it's AI generated. It was delivered well before Sora to me, and the boom and that kind of use of technology. Just for anyone who has that I think very fair question in the times we live in. But I do not believe it's it's phony. I would not have published it if I did. But she you have Weinberg doing two things. Sorry, she's telling her your text messages, and she starts paraphrasing a couple of them. Where you want to kill him, you say you're going to use the investigation to drag him into the mud. All these things are create a credibility battle between you and her. But then but also I should say, Olivia lists out lots of other forms of evidence that she said she provided to the league during her investigation. And that includes everything from the forensic stuff. She includes, she references accounts from multiple other women, those police reports, again, one of which, has cops saying, not just her, but cops saying, we saw her locked out. And and pretty detailed and vivid accounts from other people saying, Mike abused me, right? And she's listing them one by one, and Maura claims, well, we looked at all those things. And paraphrasing again her language here, again, you could watch a whole full recording to see exactly what she allegedly said in this recording. But we looked at all those things, we follow up on everything, but we still there's not enough evidence to justify discipline. And she also claims that every piece of evidence that you use will be thrown against you because of your text messages. And so, that led to a problem, to sort of a apparent tension, because you're making a falsifiable claim at this point. We followed up on everything. Well, did you? Because I then spoke to multiple people who say that they either dated Mike or they witnessed, Mike doing things to people he dated, and claimed that MLB never interviewed them. They claimed that in some situations there was no even known attempt to contact them. So when MLB in their statement says they ran a comprehensive investigation, there are a lot of people who directly dispute that phrasing. In fact, I think one alleged witness is says to me sarcastically, I thought they were going to run a real investigation.
This is sort of a hard question to phrase, but in your judgment, looking at all of the details of these multiple different sort of investigations that you've been reporting on over the course of the last couple of months, is there a consistent definition of what comprehensive means to MLB, a comprehensive probe? Because there's law enforcement, the investigations, criminal cases, is an extremely flawed system. but like there is a protocol that they are supposed to follow each time that there is sort of these allegations get made or a 911 call gets made, like so that the reports are at least consistent, ideally. Again, I am saying all of this with so many caveats that like you can't even believe how many caveats I am putting to this, because like I don't trust even like the police departments in all of these instances. But for MLB, like the sheen that they are putting on this Department of Investigations is that it is like a sort of like a private version of like the public investigation that happens when these allegations get made. And so I ask you, like, what does comprehensive even mean when the goal of MLB is not to like win a case in court or lose a case in, or whatever? It's just to apply this policy that they have.
The source is Cohen, trust me, bro, as far as kind of what the standard is, because they have not explained in real any meaningful detail as to what level they need. I mean, now to be clear, like there are some legal terms that existed within the CBA, like just cause, for example, as you guys as union people likely know, that you cannot just administer punishment because you want to, right? Which is, the way most workers in this country that we live in exist, right? But like, but there is at least some process, which I would, argue is a good thing, to be clear, just cause, and for employees, even when they are millionaire athletes. But otherwise, like, we don't have a front facing standard, towards that. And that is at the very least, a difference between the criminal legal system, and where there is, more disclosure as to what theoretical disclosure anyway, as to what
and
what
like legal
sufficient
precedent.
evidence.
I mean, but for better or for worse, like there
Right.
is legal precedent, whereas MLB,
Yes.
it does, like Alex said, is a sort of a one-off case, like whether they decide they want to be
Yes.
hardcore or not about the investigation.
And that, you guys brought up the Jarius Familia thing. Because again, remember, we don't have a legal precedent, but I was able to at least establish some precedent from previous cases through the work I've been doing. And so so part of that is I have been trying to trace the steps of these of the DOI by putting in public records requests at every kind of law enforcement stop that I thought might have an interaction with, a investigation within the 50 states of America, right? And I may expand that internationally as it becomes more relevant with some cases. But anyway, I'm trying to 50 US states for now because that's what I know best. And so in some of those situations, and that is like, the Jarius Familia one, we see examples where Major League Baseball worked very closely with law enforcement with which to establish the evidence that they felt they needed, with which they offered a discipline. And so in the Familia case, like they, we and to be clear, MLB does briefly allude to this in their statement about it. They had help from like the borough attorney of Fort Lee, New Jersey, which is where Jarius Familia, for those who aren't familiar, is a former Mets closer. He was on the pennant winning team, and probably most famous for being waiting in the bullpen while Matt Harvey threw away the World Series, despite being an incredible pitcher at the time.
We
Sorry,
don't need to take any stray
we had to have
shots
some levity to these really
at the
sad
Mets.
stories. So
Okay,
levity
the
for me
Mets versus
anyway.
Yankees debate thing, it was settled. We won it. All right,
Do
let's
you
leave
guys
that
need to
there.
see my MacBook? I'm in the laptop class too. All right, like let's chill. All right. So you need, but look, I'm podcasting too. I'm not a doorman. I'm not I don't work with my hands.
Yeah, exactly.
But anyway, sorry, that's like so niche and online.
Correct. But the
back
exact people listening to this podcast will know exactly what
exactly.
we mean.
But yes, but targeted. Back to Familia. When his criminal probe started to kind of fall apart due to his now wife, right, alleging she was not physically harmed. All these sorts of things that that were either clarifications or retractions, depending on, I guess your point of view on this, right? It led to the criminal probe sort of like dying down, but MLB was not deterred by that. And so they started asking for and hosting conversations using like their again, they're former cops and prosecutors to use those relationships and use their navigate their understanding of the system to get what they could to find that he had broken the policy in some unnamed way. And I say unnamed, quite literally, because Rob Manfred has not said what Familia exactly did, but just that he ruled out that it was not, a physical assault. Like or should say there's not enough evidence to claim that he physically assaulted, his partner. And so, but they still found his conduct, quote, inappropriate. What does that mean again? We don't know. But
I mean,
again,
when we've
that
talked about
precedent
it in
is
the
so
past, like I think the closest thing that we have like in American culture to describe like how Rob talks about this is honestly like in the military, conduct unbecoming. Like that's probably the phrase that he doles out that's closest to what we have as like an idea of what it is. Like there's no exact thing of what conduct unbecoming of being a Marine is, right? But like it's just like you kind of know it when you see it, right? Like that's literally how they talk about this in public settings.
Right. Is so conduct unbecoming can be inappropriate. Could in a broader sense, like could that include I don't know, thrusting with your outfielder bros like in the Giants game? Like
I mean literally
Vader
like,
them. Or like
the dude it's a bad look, bro. Is like Uribe, kind of the policy.
Right? Like doing this chop to the dugout. Like all that stuff is like I guess inappropriate conduct too. But anyway, I digress. Point is like Familia provides a useful precedent because if the league does not have evidence with which to claim he assaulted someone, but still found his conduct to be, again, quote unquote, inappropriate, then who's to say, like, what Clevenger did, was, by the baseline that the league said, that by the commissioner of the league said, that Rob Manfred said was inappropriate. Because we have cops saying he locked her out.
Yeah.
Like, not me, not the woman, the police who responded to the woman in multiple situations. Claiming that he locked his partner out of their home. In one of the reports that I obtained, that by the way MLB did not apparently, for reasons I'm not aware of just yet. The police claimed that the woman had every legal right to go back into her home. Is this a form of domestic violence? Is this at the very least inappropriate? MLB won't say. I certainly know if I were in that situation, that would be a really scary thing for a family member to do to me.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I want to just zoom out a little bit and actually sort of tie this conversation back to this episode's other topic, which is the collective bargaining agreement, right? Obviously, we've been talking about this from a sort of a league specific perspective, but obviously this domestic violence policy is joint. It's right there in the name. It's a joint policy, right? It's collectively bargained over. The confidentiality clause that the league can hide behind is something that in theory the PA wants to protect its players and give them privacy. So I'm just curious, as someone who does also do reporting on the labor side of things, like how do you sort of sit with this system that on the one hand is designed to in theory give players due process, and on the other side is sort of creating this opaque system that is essentially failing the women who are on the other side of this story. I mean, how do you kind of wrestle with that duality?
Yeah, man. I mean, I remember with the Familia thing, it was very hard for me to figure out a good headline for it because, like, I'm thinking about like both the horrors of domestic violence, and to be clear, like you don't have to hit someone to be abusive. Like there are other ways, and I'm glad that MLB has a definition of that includes other forms of ways of harming your wife, your whoever you may be with, your children, etc. And my thing is ultimately the consistency. Is everyone approach and treat it in a way that is fair and consistent. And that's where where we run into some of this tension and challenges based on, again, the reporting that I've been able to explore and expose, I guess, so far. Two action items come to me when I, so far through my work and career, I'm not a legal expert. I'm not an employer, labor law expert or anything like that. But one is that in these situations, Major League Baseball has an advocate for, this is their own thing. They advocate for themselves. The PA also has advocates. They have unions. They have they have well-paid, they have lawyers. They have well-paid attorneys with which to help, represent people. But the people who don't are the women who come forward. Kids, obviously. They don't have a formal advocate. It would be very good for both the league and the union, I think, on a moral sense, with which to include an advocate for them. Does that go against their interests? Possibly.
Yeah. I mean, does it go against their interests is an interesting question, but like also does it go against their perceived like jurisdiction? Like MLB, we keep using the word like due process or investigation or comprehensive, but like MLB's job in this sense is to determine whether or not a player functionally gets paid, like is suspended. Like they're not really or like banned, like because this is a job. This is not the law. Like it's not their job to enforce the law. And yet I think that like for me, what I keep coming back to is like they are relying on these like the faint outline or whisper of structures for people whose job it is to enforce the law, when really what they won't admit is that they are actually having a sort of economic argument over whether or not a player is paid. And I think as the policy is written, like it's written akin to what the law looks like, and with the idea of like the moral of we do not want someone who is doing this in our league. And I think that is probably the most admirable part of this, is that the policy is clear and pretty strongly written. But then when it comes to actually enforcing it, like what is let alone the interest, but like what is the incentive for them to find the appropriate punishment for these players?
Yeah, it seems as though, again, it seems again the vocalized incentive is avoid a Ray Rice situation. Avoid a situation where you have a too tame penalty on someone who is credibly accused of harming someone, harming a woman or a child or whatever it may be, and then more things leak out, and then you have your tail between your legs and you're embarrassed, by the shame of having to go up to Congress, something like that, which is actually what all those sports leagues have to do after the Ray Rice situation, or we're asked to do, to testify about like how they're going to like get this right. I would argue that the Clevenger situation mirrors the Rice one in a number of ways, in that, there was a player who was investigated, was given, not just a tame discipline, but no discipline at all. I guess the league claimed that they did not have, claimed privately in the alleged recording, they did not have enough evidence to substantiate it. But then, I guess through the journalism that I've been able to do, there is there is more evidence that either the league had thoroughly engaged with, or things that have happened even after the player has been accused of after he was cleared of his allegations of misconduct, that make the situation or add more like rightful scrutiny as to what happened. That is what the league is trying to avoid. Is they're trying to avoid being scrutinized to the level that Roger Goodell had to when his people started, especially the media, started poking holes into the process and investigation they used with which to give Ray Rice initially a 2-game suspension from the league before video leaked out of him that articulated exactly how violent he had been towards his fiance at the time. But then, the second action item I want to add to, and it goes back to kind of the due process stuff that I do think is really, really important in all this, because then, without that, the league can kind of, almost totally unilaterally, punish who they want without any sort of bulwark there. But, and that's the Jose Reyes case, where, again, like Familia, we saw evidence of the league going the extra mile with which to obtain evidence by working very closely and very collaboratively with the law enforcement body that was handling his criminal probe. that criminal probe was also falling through, like the familiar one. Apparently, his wife at the time was not cooperating, which for people who are maybe unaware of some of the dynamics of domestic violence, which again I hope you aren't. People who have been harmed often, recant, previous claims, or they won't cooperate with law enforcement for lots of different reasons. And I know it's a sidebar, but it's an important one. It's one, due to everything from concern of more retaliation from the partner, concern about the criminal legal system not treating their partner well in this. Not for nothing, Jose Reyes is a Black Dominican man, the Black Dominican immigrant, and so and his wife is also a Dominican immigrant as well. So there are a lot of reasons that I would be slow to pass judgment on as to why someone would come forward and or I should say not come forward, retract the statement. That does not it does not prove they did or didn't do it. It's just but it is a thing that happens a lot, and why these things are honestly really tough to adjudicate. And that's even, that's true of both the internal side of this as well. But sidebar over, back to the facts of this case. When the criminal probe was dying out, MLB again was none deterred in making sure that they could make a decision. And so what they did was they say that they asked Jose Reyes to sign a waiver that would release his rights to privacy during the criminal probe. And by doing so, MLB would be able to access evidence that they would not otherwise have due to the law being on, Reyes' side as an accused person under investigation. Like, the cops don't just give away every single, note that they have and thought that they have, during an investigation because, people are innocent until proven guilty, right? And so, and that would, that could change people's perception of a incident that has not yet been formally determined as, true or not, for all we know. And so, this doesn't, giving away proof that you did something doesn't seem like something that would be in Jose Reyes' interest, but somehow through this email chain, they got him to sign it. And the police were there through much of it, advising MLB on what they needed with which to get Jose Reyes, which to get Jose Reyes' evidence files. The union got involved at some point, and there was a holdup again available with these public documents, some of which I published on iBlack. But I shudder to think how they got Jose Reyes to do something that was again based on everything we know, at face value anyway, against his interests. What kind of was there a negotiation here? What incentives were given for doing that? What penalties were on the table for perhaps not doing that? Again, I don't know, conjecture, but I certainly would not. I'm certainly curious as to again why someone would do something against their interest that would theoretically give the league more dirt with which to justify a suspension or a punishment, and thus the loss of millions of dollars. So yeah, clean that up is my is my 2 cents here as a not a lawyer, not a union lawyer. It seems to me that if that has not been cleaned up, this was 2016, so perhaps things have changed in the process here. But twisting people's arms hypothetically to get them to release criminal investigations that their employer theoretically should not be privy to is, a thing worth looking at. Again, allegedly, I don't know if any arms are twisted. Maybe Jose Reyes really wanted MLB to know.
Bradford, thank you so much for joining us to walk through this reporting and what you're working on and what you're continuing to plan to work on. The website is readiblack.com. You can get it delivered fresh and early in your inbox whenever Bradford writes one of these or any other story, really. You're not just writing about this, though. This is what you have been focusing on for the last couple months. Any other things that you want to call out for folks?
Yeah, sure. I mean, like I said, I started this newsletter for real in February as just a way of writing and reporting on the stories I didn't see on ESPN anymore, that you probably don't see in your newspaper anymore. as you guys know, I'm a former New York Daily Newser. Before I got there, they used to have a investigations desk just for the Daily News's sports page. Like, if you can imagine that. Again, if you're for New Yorkers, you're like, this is a newspaper that was once proud and now has 50 employees, serving a city of 8-9 million or whatever, and 50 reporters. It's so imagine that. Like that is the kind of thing that so many institutional media outlets had, which was a more consistent, accountability oriented look at how sports is working. And it was never enough, but it was but there were things like that. Now we have places like the Washington Post getting entirely out of the game of sports, and ESPN has an investigative desk. You'll never see them on First Take at 9 a.m. Outside the Lines doesn't exist anymore, which is the TV show they used to have with which to promote, again, deeper probing looks at sports. There is just not a lot of sports media that exists outside of gambling or rights holders that are financing and funding the reporting that happens. And so in that kind of environment, I'm like, well, these are stories that still need to be told. They're not lesser because they exist in different billion-dollar institution than Amazon or Meta, which of course lots of big papers still do have people who cover that, or websites. And so I'm like, all right, well, I'm gonna do it myself, and I'm gonna trust that there's enough people who want to read this, and frankly, enough people who want to financially partner to make sure that it's sustainable. And that is how iBlack, the iBlack that you are hopefully reading or will be reading soon, was born. Obviously, baseball is my true north. It's not the only thing I've written about in this. Frankly, MLB is considered among the best of American sports leagues investigating these issues. So, trust me that you will be reading about other sports leagues from me on that subject, but also just how power and money and race and gender show up in sports. I'm not the no fun police either. So I think you'll find wit and humor in pockets. Even in very dour and dismal situations, and the goal is to have at least once a week, that in your inbox, a story that you damn well know you would not have read in ESPN. So that's the iBlack pitch and iBlack promise, and I hope that you at the very least throw in your email. And if you have, $9 or so to spare, kick in my way to make sure that this stays possible. So, thank you all for having me, though, Alex and Bobby. I'm a fan. 6-time caller, long-time listener, as you guys said. So, thanks for supporting the work too.
Yeah, Bradford, always a pleasure. Appreciate the time.
Thank you to Bradford. Thank you to everybody for listening. If you care about these topics specifically, I really recommend subscribing to Bradford's newsletter. Yeah. It is the kind of directly, it's not confrontational, the reporting, but in the era that we live in, where challenging, difficult stories don't get told often because they're harder and more expensive and potentially drive less revenue than...
And maybe risk access.
Correct. I think it feels refreshing to have people still trying to do something like this. I mean, I could talk for another hour that we don't have here because we've been talking for a while. I could talk another hour about how the fragmentation of the media landscape, to the point where the only way that you can actually write what you want to write is to start a newsletter, has damaged this kind of reporting. But Bradford is clearly trying to have that not be the case in the work that he is doing. I think in part because he's partnered up with Beehive and been able to do that, and I think that's really great. But all that to say, you all know Bradford if you've been listening to this podcast for a while, and you know his work and where he stands on this stuff. So highly recommend it. That's all I got. Brooklyn Cyclones meetup Friday, June 12th. Come out, hang out. It's going to be a good vibe. Pride night. at Maimonides Park. Fill out the Colorado Rockies meetup form, also link in the description if you are intending on coming to Denver, Colorado on Saturday, August 22nd to meet up at a Rockies game. We can really get to the bottom of Dick Monfort's approach to presenting a salary cap. We can ask him some insightful questions and encourage him to reconsider. Tipping Pitches meetup saved the baseball season for 2027. We talked Dick Monfort down off the ledge that is the salary cap.
Should we see if Sonia's around to come to the meetup?
Sonia Sotomayor, former U.S. Supreme Court Justice. Yeah, I think that's pretty good. Yeah, she's probably not doing anything, right?
I don't think so.
Is she a former justice or is she still a justice?
Isn't she current?
Wow, good for her.
Famously, you don't really retire from those roles, so.
Well, some
we should end this episode probably.
I think some justices on one side of the aisle do retire with the idea that they will be replaced by a younger person to further their point of view. That's all for this week's episode of Tipping Pitches. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next week.
Hello, everybody. I'm Alex Rodriguez. Tipping Pitches.
Tipping Pitches.
This is the one that I love the most.
Tipping Pitches.
So we'll see you next week. See ya!